is. So, I am excited also because Jocelyn had mentioned it. We had the opportunity, and we knew of a couple of the guys that we do a lot of their songs. Brandon Lake and Phil Wickham are amazing worship leaders, and me and Jocelyn took Jameson last August to go see them in Fresno. And as the concert started, it's like, Jameson's 4. He's going to enjoy it, and he listens to this music, and he knows these songs. But I was like, next year we should take the worship team. And Jocelyn's like, yeah. And so we did. These guys serve all the time for us, and so we took them. And most of them have never, probably Patty and Coop are the two that probably had seen something of this nature in a worship concert with 10,000 plus people in an arena, and it's just an encouraging, powerful thing. A lot of the things talked about, not just sang about, talked about was like, hey, you know what? God's doing a movement, and He's moving in the state of California too, and I firmly believe that to be true. I see that because there were lots of people there, and there were lots of people worshiping and engaged, and it was awesome. And so because of it, I am just kind of a little bit more excited, a little bit more jittery, got a little bit more jump in my step. If you ask me how I'm doing this morning, instead of, I'm good, I probably said great. Because I kind of had planned my sermon. I got my work done kind of early. I just had to do finishing touches yesterday. We went to the concert on Friday. So it was like a lot of energy and encouragement going on in the Benziger household because of it. And then I started to work again on my message on Saturday and remembered as we are in the book of Proverbs, and I'll explain a little bit more, I realized that I need to practice what I preach, and God was beating me up a little bit with this message. So I'm warning you guys, you might not be the only ones in the room who feel this, but as we read the Proverbs this morning, I shared with a couple of people what I'm talking on. I was like, I gotta go, I gotta leave, because I don't know if I want God to do a work on me on this. And it's very, very, very fun. And hard to hear. So with that being said, I need you to realize that it's been spoiled because of the title of it, but we are going to be talking about controlling our anger and what the book of Proverbs has to say about that. Before I go any further, I do want to give us a recap. It has been quite some time since we've actually been in our series of Proverbs. We've had guest speakers, and they've been great. If you missed them, they are on the website, and you can go ahead and watch. The guest speakers were great, but we normally preach in series around here, right? And it's been since, I believe, the end of July since me or Pastor Barry had preached out of Proverbs in the series. And so I asked him, I was like, do we go back to that? And he's like, I feel like there's some stuff there. And I was just like, okay. And so I looked at the list of kind of like different ones I can go with, and I saw anger, and I was like, nope, get it out of here. I'm not going to deal with that. Not going to work on that message. That seems pretty rough. And nope. And God just kept bringing me back to it. One, because I know it's something I need to work on, but I also think in general, if you, as Barry likes to say, if you have a belly button, I'm sure there's some anger that you need to get control of. And so, with that being said, the book of Proverbs, as a recap, as a reminder, it's been a little bit. It is one of those books that is kind of different than a lot of the other Bible books, as Barry did a great job explaining that in the first Proverbs back in July. So again, if you need more information about what Proverbs are, go listen to that message. But the thing that makes it so different is it's not a narrative. It's not a story. It's not even a letter like a lot of Paul's writings in the New Testaments are letters to the churches. It falls kind of in the poetical book category, is what they call it, with Psalms, Proverbs, and technically Job is in that poetical book category. And so it's one of those things where Psalms are kind of seen as songs, and Proverbs are kind of seen as these things of wisdom, things that we can glean from. The definition, of the word Proverbs, it has to do with stating a general truth or piece of advice, right? And that's kind of where Proverbs has landed. And so this morning, I just, like I said, mentioned before, I'm being real and honest and telling you, after this message and after me working on it, I felt like I might have a little bit of an anger problem, and God's going to do a work in me in that. And you might be like, oh, you're the Pastor Josh, there's no way. It's like, well, my worship team knows I have an anger problem. You guys, I'm going to let you in on it. I might have a little bit of an anger problem. And so God is working on me in that, and I hope that that comes through here. And then I also need you to know right now, out of the bat, because I felt like, I can't really, I'm going to put my own 2 cents into this, but a lot of the stuff that I learned were from different wise other people, whether it was sermons, other books, all of those things, and I'm probably not going to give a whole lot of credit to them. Especially you on the internet, you might be like, this guy's just copying parts of this guy's sermon. I might have in many different ways, but I'm going to deliver it a little bit differently because I'm going to tell my stories when it comes to anger. But it's so interesting to me. One of the things that I've learned and the facts that I've learned, that there's different, men and women deal with anger differently. It was the one thing that was like a gigantic light bulb to me, and it's so true. And some of you, like I said, this is generically, so it might not be the case, but the majority of men in this room probably get anger and rise in their anger and struggle with anger when it comes to dealing with things. And women, on the other hand, the majority of you, not all of you, tend to get anger-filled towards people. And I thought that was so interesting when I read that. I was like, oh, that maybe that's true, maybe that's not. And next thing you know, I'm spilling my drink this morning, and I'm having a hard time with my printer, and I'm dealing with all the things, and I can feel my anger rising. And I'm going, oh, okay. And then, of course, I might have lashed out a little bit. And, of course, at this point, now I might have lashed out a little bit. And my wife is going, oh, man, you're already on edge. And I'm sitting here going like, yeah, I tend to get frustrated at things. I tend to struggle with things. And the average woman, I guess, tends to be more frustrated towards people. And like I said, this is just looking at statistics and all the other facts and all those things. So don't get mad at me, you women, if you're like, no, I'm not one of the statistics. I'm like, well, yeah, you are, because you're mad at me. What's also interesting. Good. I'm glad someone caught the joke. Good. All right. What's interesting is also, I felt this 2 weeks ago, like I mentioned, when my wife went away to work and I'm taking care of the kids, and I was kind of a single parent for 4 or 5 days. It also says here that single parents tend to struggle with their anger twice as much. I thought that was interesting. I was like, oof. Like I definitely felt it when you are alone doing that. It also says tends to be one of the places where anger is most felt. Where do you guys think that is? No, not just with small children. In what location? Work? No, work is, yes, stressful. It can be anger-filled, but it's actually at home. Anger is the number one place where it rears its ugly head, is at our home. And unfortunately, that makes things a little rough for me dealing with small children and having them around. We will see that it's just not so good. So today, if I'm really honest, yes, we're talking about anger, but we as Christians really need to gain control of our anger. We need to gain control of our anger in healthy ways. Proverbs 16 says this, be a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes the city. You know, the warriors, they were in charge of taking the city, but it's saying, hey, be patient. It's better than being a warrior. Being someone who can have a little bit of self-control. A wise man once said, named Jesus, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your soul? What do you benefit if you gain the whole world and you lose your soul if you can't keep it under wraps? We've seen that in the case of history. I'm a history nerd, and Alexander the Great is one of the big examples that I see. He had a young man that saved his life in battle. His name is Cletus the Black. There was a Cletus the White already taken, so he was Cletus the Black. I don't know if that meant he wore a black robe or what. He had a black sash. I have no idea. But Alexander the Great was saved by this young man in battle, as Alexander had conquered the whole world. He'd conquered it all. And his empire was vast and huge. And one night, they have a big old banquet and celebrating of how great Alexander's conquering had been done. And Cletus the Black is there. Too much wine had been involved. And sure enough, he's going to send Cletus out to go conquer more. And Cletus really didn't want to. He didn't feel like we needed more. What are you talking about? We're going to lose thousands of troops if we do this. It's the middle of winter. And Alexander the Great gets so upset that he calls for a spike and he throws it at Cletus and kills him. In that moment, the man who saved his own life, was then grieving because he had murdered his own brother in arms. He'd been there. He had made the mistake because he let the anger get to him. How dare you talk back to me? How dare you fight me? This is my whole kingdom. I did this. You saved me once, but I would have been fine. And he killed his own brother. He was all accounts, though, we see through the course of history is recorded that he grieved for him, though. He felt sorry for him. He realized that in that anger, he made a poor decision. And so my question to you, has you ever felt like you've let your anger get the best of you? Man, I listen to a lot of music. Yes, we listen to a lot of Christian worship music, but about 15 years ago when I was younger and probably a little bit more impressionable with my music, there was a song by the Foo Fighters, very raucous band, and the song was, "Is Someone Getting the Best of You?" And I was not allowed to drive to that song in the car on the radio, because next thing you know, I look down, I'm going 100 miles an hour, like on the freeway. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Like, it just was an anger-filled song. So the question I pose to you is, have you ever felt like you've let your anger get the best of you? And I would be the first to admit it, going, yes. And I hope you would too. And I feel like God has something for us in that. You know, this week I got a call from my brother, and he asked me, hey, you got a couple hours, like an hour or two? I'm digging some holes. I was like, yeah, sure. He's like, I got a 2-man auger, and Dad can't really help. His shoulder's all bad. So can you come out and help? I was like, yeah, sure, no big deal. I get there. I'm not the foreman on the job. It's not my house. I'm in not really a whole lot of a rush. I told him, I said, hey, no, dude, like, it's okay. And we get there, and he's frustrated. Blah, blah, all the typical male anger at things again. And as this is happening, he can't find the pin. He rented this from Home Depot, and there wasn't a pin on the bit to put onto the auger. And I don't know where it is. How could they be so dumb? Cursing the guy at Home Depot's name. And next thing I was like, hey, buddy, I think it's on the other one. They gave you 2 bits. And he's like, oh, yep, there it is. Puts it on. He's still a little frustrated. We get to the first hole. He's like, this should be quick. This is all soft dirt. We make it about 3 inches till we hit just hard rock pan. And I could see the anger. And mind you, I just got done writing a good chunk of my sermon. And so I'm kind of smiling as my brother's getting angry. And I'm trying, like, even this morning, trying not to laugh telling the story, because I'm sitting here going, like, if the roles were reversed, this would 100% be me. If he was the one who'd worked on the sermon and it was my auger and my fence that needed to be dug, I would have been mad. I would have been anger-filled. But what's so interesting is, yes, it happens. Happens probably on the daily. And it's something we need to keep in check. Proverbs 29 says this: a hot-tempered man commits many sins. Many sins. Many different ways a hot-tempered man can get himself into trouble. And it says, to be honest with you, it's one of those questions that I ask is like, yeah, I agree with this verse. I've seen it. I saw it. What's so interesting, you've never heard of anyone really, they might say this, but you've never heard of anyone committing a violent crime out of love. Right? You've never heard of anyone going to murder someone out of love. No, they might think that they are because they're a little cuckoo in the head, but it's all done out of hatred, anger, frustration. And it's always anger-filled. Proverbs, again, 15, a hot-tempered man causes dissension. It divides. Your anger can divide. It can divide a family. I'm sitting here actually worried about November 5th when half the country is upset, no matter the results of what happened. Because it just causes a divide and dissension and anger. People will be upset. That's my prayer for our country when it comes to that day. Is, vote for the right person, sure. But also that the anger of the other side who didn't win will not cause essentially destruction and dissension and more chaos. How many of you guys have ever gotten in an argument because of those hot-tempered disputes? Like, I'm sure, much like me, my prayer for my marriage is that I would keep my anger in check. And a lot of the times when we're having serious discussions in matters, it can tend to be heated. And the one thing that can't happen is dissension. We can't be divided. Doesn't mean we have to agree 100%, but we have to understand and know. And like I said, we can't be like what our country's going to be like come November 5th, unfortunately, unless God does a miracle. And what I see also here is that Proverbs 14, anger causes mistakes. Anger causes mistakes. And all of these are what we should be doing when it comes to weighing the consequences of our anger. Weighing the consequences of our anger. Looking at how hot-tempered man has many, many sins, has dissension, and that anger causes mistakes. It is all pointing back to the idea that our anger, and we need to weigh those consequences. We need to weigh those consequences. Proverbs 14 says people with hot tempers do foolish things. Foolish things. When I was in high school, this is how old I am, I actually went to high school in the 90s, 1999, and in the phrase, "What's up, fool?" there was a thing. And I'm not even joking. Junior high and high school, my junior high youth pastor at this time, Richard Coffey, love him to death. He called me, he pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, listen, Josh, like, you kind of the leader of, I was the oldest at this little church that I was attending at the time." And he says, "You're always saying fool. And I don't think you understand that's borderline, not like a swear word, but it's kind of a negative thing when it comes to the Bible." And he called me out on that, and I went and read my Bible and was like, yeah, he's right. Being a fool is not what you want to be. As trendy as it is and cool as it is to say that as a junior high school kid to each other, that was not the case. But guess what? The hot temper do foolish things. You don't want to be that fool. You don't want to be that jester. You don't want to be the one who makes dumb decisions, all because you can't keep your anger in check. I heard this quote, and I heard it, and I was researching it, and the person's actually credited to it as actor, comedian, cowboy man, Mr. Will Rogers. It says, "People who fly into rage seldom make good landings." People who fly into rage seldom make good landings, and I was like, whoa, all right, that's not that'll preach, right? Like it's crazy. It's crazy that we think that our anger is going to really help out the situation, when really it doesn't. We'll talk more about that in a second. And we're in Proverbs 11 here, verse 29. "He who brings trouble on his family will inherit only wind." And one of the things in my life goal is I would love for my ceiling to be my children's base floor, the taking off. Not just financially, I'd love to be at a place where we set them up well. I'd love to be able to give them things as well. But man, when it comes to this right here, brings trouble on his family, you inherit wind. You get nothing. And it's something that I'm constantly thinking about. The Living Bible says, "The fool who provokes his family to anger, resentment will finally have nothing worthwhile." They'll have nothing left. Anger that starts in the family, unfortunately, has an awful effect. Man, I can contest to that. And I don't need or want that in my family life. There was an article by James Dobson focused on the family that I ran into when doing the research, and a survey was taken of 9 to 12-year-old children. They were asked 2 questions. What do you most like about your mom, and what do you like the least? The answer to the first question were very varied, but almost unanimously the answer to the second question was when she screams. Why do we scream? Why do we pitch such a fit? Simply because we think, and unfortunately works. It has a short-term effect though. When people are screamed at, they normally comply out of fear. I've seen it myself. Jameson, when he's doing something he's not supposed to do, and I have a hard time finding the words. No, 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 no! They're like that right there. And then immediately, he stops what he's doing, but then he cowers, sometimes cries. And it's frustrating for him. It's frustrating for him. But the truth of the matter is, in the long run, we're losing. Because that anger and me lashing out and screaming in that way creates isolation. Creates him feeling like, oh, I can't do anything right. Creates the fact that he's by himself. And the Proverbs is warning us and encouraging us to weigh in to those consequences of your anger. All of those words, listen, I realize they're not necessarily all mine, but things that I discovered when researching. And man, can I tell you right now, I'm not any good at this. I even as I'm writing the sermon this week, you can ask my wife, it probably didn't get a whole lot better this week. And it's something that I need to understand and know and begin to grow in, because the consequences of my anger have a massive effect on my family. And that goes for each and every one of us as well. So the second thing, along with weighing our consequences, the next one seems so childish and so kiddie, but as I was researching, the one thing that I kept running into is this idea of when you feel anger coming, count to 10. It sounds like it's such a crazy little kid thing to do, a practical thing to do, so childish, and that idea of counting to 10 slowly and having a response and reaction instead of actually being full of anger is something that I'm going to try to implement, because as I was researching, not only the weight of the consequences of our anger, but how we could fix it in that slow, take a step back type of action is better received overall. Proverbs 21:11 says, "A foolish gives vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control." I used to watch a lot of sports before my kids were around. We would spend time watching live basketball games. Now I just kind of tend to follow them. And so I don't get to just sit down and watch a 3-hour basketball game. We just don't have the time for that anymore in our lives. And that is completely okay. It'll happen occasionally. I know Derek's like, what are you talking about? Sunday's coming, man. Football, right? And I'm sitting here like, it's just not really in our cards. Well, here's the thing that I have definitely seen and learned. We watched a lot of basketball. My wife was borderline recruited to play basketball as well, so she will enjoy watching basketball. And the latest success of the Golden State Warriors over here in the Bay Area has been kind of fun to watch. They're a fun team, but they have one guy on the team who I legitimately think has a massive anger problem. Those of you who follow sports probably know who I'm talking about. His name's Draymond Green. The guy has punched teammates. He's choked out dudes. He just has an anger problem. And what's so interesting is I also spend a lot of the time on the internet scrolling, and I'll run into him talking podcasts and the actual the theory of basketball and plays and this and that. One of the best basketball minds ever, but he can't control his anger. For those of you who are a little bit older, think Dennis Rodman without the colors and the nose piercings and the weird dresses. That's what we're talking about. And this guy has a massive anger problem, and it's caused a big problem. They win the championship one year, and they had a young stud on the team, and they're getting ready to start their next title defense run. And what does he do? The first practice he sees a guy, gets frustrated and mad and punches him in the face. 2 weeks later, they trade that guy, and they have a hard time getting back to winning again. His anger has caused them to lose their championship repertoire because he couldn't control it. He couldn't take the step back. And in the moment, he got heated. And what's so interesting is he probably didn't get to count to 10. He probably counted to 1 before he swung. And what's so interesting is the great Thomas Jefferson said, when you are angry, you count to 10. When you're very angry, you count to 100. And I was sitting there going, wow. Yes, figure out a way in which you can kind of calm down. I know in my life, I've shared this in our men's Bible studies. There's moments in me and my marriage when we are talking and there's a discussion and I'm heated. And my wife is now used to this after 10 years. It used to make her really upset and mad. We were heated and it's hot and we're arguing, and it's frustrated. And I would just go, I need a minute, and I'd walk out. And it would just just tick her off at the time. But now, it's one of those things where we've come, unfortunately, normally it happens too late where we've already been at the top of our anger and we shouldn't have done that. But I take that time and I just pull back. I just need a minute. I don't want to say something that makes it even worse. Right? Like, yeah, I mean, Barry had knee surgery. I need a foot removed from mouth surgery. And it's one of those things. It's something that it's personal. And that to me, and that's something that I found that tends to work. Now, when it first happened, one of our first big fights, year maybe one in our marriage, somewhere maybe even before the year one mark, and we got out of the honeymoon stage and we had that first big fight, and I did that. Oh man, I'm sure she wanted to strangle me. You're like, what do you mean? No, we're doing this. We're finishing this fight. And now it's kind of, all right, when I do that, I'm sure it still makes her mad at times because she wants to keep going. But we take that step back, and there's a lot more love in the household, and it's not as anger-filled in our discussions. And I would challenge you to do that, not just with the people you're married to. If you have a problem at work, and you're frustrated and you're mad, and be like, hey, I'm a little upset. Can you give me a minute to cool down? And then we'll talk. It will speak wonders to them. They might, just like Jocelyn, be upset the first couple of times it happens. Like, no, I want to fight. You ever get into those situations in your married life? You're like, oh, you're looking for a fight. You go to tell a story like, oh yeah, last Christmas and we had the family over and we had lamb, and your spouse goes, no, that was 2 Christmases ago. It's like, really? What does it matter? like that starts a fight, right? That's what we're talking about here, is being able to control that impulsive anger. Impulsive anger. Proverbs 12 says, when a fool is annoyed, he quickly lets it be known. It's interesting. You can always tell when I'm pretty good at wearing my emotions on my sleeve. And you can always tell when I'm a little upset. Even if you've walked into it, if we were in here and we were fighting and you guys walked in, you'd be like, oh, okay, it's kind of heavy in here. You could tell because it's quick to be known that, Josh was blowing the gasket. I'm not much of a cooker or baker or candlestick maker, I guess, but a small pot I hear boils water real quick. Yeah, a small pot, it really does. It boils water real quick. And it's that idea right there. It is known to everyone. Listen, I also know this, that I love my wife and she's an amazing mom. I also have come to realize that her ways in which she comes down are way different than mine. But I also know that if you want how to upset her, is you do take jabs at things that are personal. And so we also have to watch what we say. We also have to watch what we say. If anyone knows my wife the best, it's probably me. And so that means I know how I can annoy her, make her mad, and anger her quickly. Same with my son. Even with sarcasm, man, I love my little guy. But all I have to do is just tell him bugs are gross and disgusting. And he's like, no, Daddy. And he's ready to fight for the love of his bugs. And he lets it be known quickly. It says here, a man's wisdom gives him patience. Sorry, on the typo. Gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. It's to his glory to overlook an offense. And this is where it gets real tough for Josh up here. Jesus did it. Jesus did it on the cross. He looked over so many offenses. He was beaten, he was slandered, he was criticized, he was put down. He died a murderer's death on a cross, and he never once retaliated. When one of his disciples, as he was being arrested, took out a sword and cut off the guard's ear, what did he do? He stopped them, healed the guy, and still went on with being arrested. He never once retaliated. And that anger and that offense, especially us men, we tend to go, I'm offended, yeah, let's go, let's fight. Especially if there's been some disrespect that's happened. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but it's something that I need to work on. So we need to not overlook an offense. We need to overlook the offense, sorry. And with that, I realized something. And this one was so hard for me to read and be like, no, that can't be true. But nothing can make you mad. You choose to get mad. And as I read from many smart, way more smart people that have probably their emotions more in check and their anger under control, I went, I need to start believing that to be true. I keep choosing to get mad. I keep choosing to get frustrated. I keep choosing to be at the top, and it weighs on everything in our households. It weighs on everything when it comes to ministry, youth ministry, worship ministry, all the things that I'm involved in. And I need to not choose to get mad. Excuse me. It's interesting, every minute that you're angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. I mean, that sounds, it's like right there. And I was just like, yes, like, yeah, if I'm choosing to be mad, I can't be happy at the same time. And Proverbs 17 says, a man of knowledge uses words with restraint. A man of understanding is even-tempered. Man, I long to be that. Even-tempered. The key to controlling your anger is knowing the facts. As you get the facts, you tend to cool down. There's moments in discussion where you're getting heated and you're misunderstanding. But when you finally get the facts, hopefully you're cooling down. And ask yourself, why is this making me so angry? If you do this, you're going to discover that anger might not actually be the problem. Anger is normally a warning light for something way deeper. The Bible tells us there are many different reasons why you're angry. 1, because you are hurt. 2, because you're frustrated. 3, because of insecurities. The good book says if you're hurt, either physically, spiritually, or emotionally, you tend to normally get angry. That's what it's saying. Sometimes I'm examining of our hurt and frustrations and insecurity. We tend to forget the idea the Bible says a man of knowledge uses words with restraint. A man of understanding is even tempered. The writer of Proverbs is telling us the way in which we deal with our anger is the weight of our consequences, and it counts before we react. And he tells us one other thing, the third thing that I just see as I'm reading the Proverbs. Yes, we need to weigh the consequences. We need to practice this idea of almost counting backwards for 10 is a good idea for point number 2. But this third one is we need to watch what we say. Proverbs 21. Oh, sorry. Proverbs 21 should be next. No, it's not. What did I do? I missed one. Proverbs 21, I'll just read it to you. He who guards the mouth and his tongue keeps himself from calamity. So to be honest with you, I don't know about you, but mouth has gotten me in trouble numerous times over and over and over again. In recent years, I feel like I'm learning to control my tongue with certain people that can tend to frustrate me more, but at home, it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder. And the Proverbs is telling us right there, we need to guard our mouth and keep our tongues from I can't even say that word, calamity. And then Proverbs 15 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. Harsh words stir up anger. The writer of Proverbs is giving excellent advice here. He's suggesting that we refrain from a word that I really like and I have a lot of fun doing, and that's sarcasm. Yeah, it can cause some anger. Thank you, whoever helped me with that joke. And at times we need to resist that. We need to resist the moment of, oh, that'll be funny if I give him a sarcastic response. Because harsh words make matters worse. And kind words tend to cool things down. Even if you're joking. Last night, I love my in-laws that came over. We went to Costco. We had lamb, and my wife calls my father-in-law and says, "Hey, we have some lamb. You want to come over?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure." And we make lamb, and I'm, like I said, no chef at all. And so, and my father-in-law's name is Russ, and Russ has done lamb before, and so I jokingly said to Jocelyn, like, after it's rested, how do we cut lamb? She's like, "I don't know. Go ask my dad." His response, love him to death, and I'm glad he made my sermon. His response is like, "With a knife." And I was just like, "Yep, thanks a lot, Jocelyn." I walked right into that sarcastic. And it didn't make me mad at all. It made me laugh because it's funny. But at the same time, just those little things, it could have made me mad because I was asking a serious question. I don't know what I'm doing with this lamb. What if I cut it in a crisscross? Like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it. And the sarcasm, unfortunately, sometimes cannot be received well. And so we do have to, unfortunately, rein that in a little bit. And what's interesting is this right here, is anger is contagious. It's interesting, if someone is angry with you, the chances are good that you're going to get angry with them also. So when it comes to your words, we got to watch those. And unfortunately, that means for me, I have little shadows running around everywhere. I am modeling this to them, and they're catching it because it's contagious. As anger can be contagious, it can be real dangerous on my family if I'm just walking around just looking like the red guy in Inside Out, the anger guy, just frustrated and mad at all times. You might be thinking to yourself, "Josh, well, what am I supposed to do with my anger? It happens." You've talked about all the idea of reining it in and being in control. And I tend to fall under this category as I was studying and as I teach the youth group and we talk about our anger. And I need to let you guys know this. You guys know that you're allowed to be mad and upset with God. I mean, you can do it and go for it. And we see it played out in a couple of people's lives in the Bible and how that goes. And I'm not sitting here telling you that it's like the worst thing in the world. I am sitting here and telling you, if we look at David's life, a man after God's own heart, he got mad and upset that God wasn't giving him victories over some of these enemies. And he went and vented all of his frustration to God, and you read about it in some of the Psalms that he wrote. That he was frustrated. Like, "God, I'm frustrated. You're not there. You're not showing up. This isn't happening. Why? And God eventually, after David stops talking, lets him in on this little secret of this idea that he knows what he's doing, that he's God, and it'll be okay. He knows what he's doing. And listen, if you're in this room and you're like me, and you might be at a place where you've had moments where you have felt anger towards God, and you were mad and upset that it did not go your way, the best way to do that, instead of blowing up on your kids because your day's not going how it's supposed to go, you get to church and instead of having a Starbucks in your hand, it's all over the bottom of your car floor, like it did to me this morning. And instead of blowing up on my worship team, I responded with a, whew, back down a little bit, take a second, and go, "God, what are you doing? What are you teaching me? What are you showing me here?" And God lets him vent all of that anger. And God takes it all. And when he's finally done venting, then God begins to work in David. God then begins to work in him and filling him up with his love, filling him up with joy, with peace, and with patience. And he wants to do that in us too. So if you're struggling with your anger, take that to him. Let him know. And when I say this, bring it to him. Go ahead, be as vulnerable, be upset. Dare I say, even yell in the car or yell at home towards God. You can do that, and that's what he's wanting. He's wanting you to be real. He doesn't want you to just, okay, I'm going to say my prayers and pray for this and that. No, he likes those. Don't get me wrong. He wants regular prayers too, but he wants you to be honest with him, and you are allowed to vent towards God. And just like David did, you'll realize and understand and know when it all goes back to God, you got to stop talking for a second and let God download in you. And it's normally full of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, which is what we see in Galatians 5:22. The fruit of the Spirit is what I just listed, but the one for us today is patience. Is patience. If you need patience, it's going to come. It's going to come at the cost of God being involved in your life on the daily. It is. I heard it once said that people are like toothpaste. When you squeeze a tube of toothpaste, whatever's inside comes out. Whatever's inside comes out. We're like that. When the pressure's on, whatever's inside comes out. If you're full of anger and hate, when you finally squeeze it, anger and hate are going to come out. But if you're full of love and joy and peace and patience, that's what's coming out when the squeeze is on. I mentioned a small pot. Well, some of us are like big pots. We are. We can handle a little bit more. Our lives tend to just pile in and fill us up with anger and stress and the tension. And the moment you put a little heat to it, it kind of so full, it just kind of bubbles over. It's not a gigantic blow a gasket, knock down, drag out fight, but there's some anger there. And that's probably tends to be where I land these days. It's a quick anger, and then it's like, okay, just calm down. Just chill. And maybe you're like me. Maybe you're the small pot. It's just always ready to go. Maybe the large pot that's just got so much on your plate when it comes to stress, anxiety, worry, concern, you name it, all the negative words. And so when something comes and just puts a little fire to you, you bubble over quickly because it's so full. But Jesus wants to help you with that anger. He wants to deal and help you understand and know that there are other problems probably, that the anger is just kind of this light to them. And anger is really a warning that you're hurt, frustrated, and insecure. Those are the problems, and he wants to deal with them. God wants to. He wants to heal your hurt, and he wants to do it with his love. He wants to handle your frustrations and anger with his peace. He wants to and does give you patience. And so my application for this morning is remember your anger has consequences. Your anger has consequences. We talked about them. And 99.99% of the time, they're almost always negative. Well, what about that justifiable anger? That's a whole nother sermon for another time, but I'm telling you right now, the majority of the anger that you feel on the daily has negative consequences. So remember that. 2, try a calming down tactic. Like I said, I tend to, in the middle of a heated battle, I go, I need a minute. Sometimes too late, sometimes too early, sometimes to make them more mad, but I need to do it the right way. Maybe for you, it is that idea of counting down from 10. And if you're really upset, like Jefferson said, count to 100. Number 3, ask God to help watch what you say. Keep your mouth in check. You know, your frustration and your moments end up hurting other people. And number 4, talk to God about your anger. Talk to your God about your anger and where you're at. God, I'm pretty upset. It went awful. I got to church this morning and there was coffee on my toes. And then I need you to understand when it comes to talk to God about your anger, much like David did, then you need to listen to God. Then you need to listen for God. And the fact that he's right there, that he loves you. You know, sometimes when I go and I vent my frustrations, not about my wife, but other things, and I vent them to my wife, all I'm looking for is a poor, sweet baby. And I'm telling you, God is right there to go, I love you, and give you the best poor, sweet baby. It's okay. It's okay. It'll be okay. He has your back. James 1:9. I'll end with this. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Make that your prayer this week. Make that your prayer this week. Would you pray with me? God, we love you. We thank you for this morning. We thank you for this time in worship. And looking at your Proverbs and the words that you spoke to people that they then wrote down for us, that are just great ways to live our life. And God, what's so awesome about following you is we all fall short of them. We all fall short. And we need help. So this week, may each and every one of us have a conversation with you about where our anger is at, why we are so upset, that we would acknowledge the fact that our anger is going to have consequences, that we would work on our calming down tactics, that we would ask you to help us watch our mouths and what we say, and making the problems even worse, and maybe even making other people mad, as our anger is contagious. God, and I ask for help when it comes to this congregation that continues to talk to you about their anger. Not only would they vent their frustrations to you, but they'd be bold enough to actually sit back and listen to your response. And that response is full of so much love and joy and peace and patience and self-control. God, we see here in James chapter 1 that we need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So help us with that, Father. We love you, God. I pray a blessing over Living Hope this week. May we continue to grow in our relationships with you. You are so good, Father. In your precious name I pray. Amen.